My wife accused me of cheating because of her best friend's lie. She destroyed our marriage without proof. But when the truth came out months later, and she came back begging, I had already moved on, and watching her friend's life fall apart was the justice they never saw coming. I'm 35 years old. I live in Denver, and about a year and a half ago, my marriage exploded in the stupidest and most unfair way possible. And I need to tell this story because finally, the truth came out. And watching everything crumble for the people who destroyed me has been, I'm not gonna lie, incredibly satisfying. I guess I should start at the beginning, when I met Grace like 6 years ago at a work event. She was working in marketing for a tech company. I was in software sales, and we connected immediately. You know, that instant chemistry you can't explain. She was smart, funny, beautiful, and honestly, I thought I'd won the lottery. We dated for almost 2 years before I proposed, and that whole time was pretty much perfect, except for one detail I should have taken more seriously: her best friend Tiffany. I met Tiffany like 3 months into dating Grace, and from the first moment, I knew this woman was going to be a problem. She was one of those people who needs to be the center of attention all the time, always with some drama, always needing validation, always competing for Grace's attention. She was like 33 at the time, but acted like a teenager. The first time the three of us went out to dinner, Tiffany literally spent the entire night talking about her problems with her boyfriend at the time, Kevin, interrupting every time Grace and I tried to have a normal conversation. Grace told me afterwards, "Oh, you know how Tiffany is. She's going through a rough time." And I thought, well, we all have problematic friends, no big deal. But the thing is, Tiffany was always going through a rough time. There was always some new drama, and Grace was always there to rescue her. When we got engaged, I thought things would get better, that Tiffany would understand Grace had her own life now and would give us space. Massive mistake. Wedding planning was a nightmare thanks to her. Tiffany wanted to have an opinion about absolutely everything: Grace's dress, the flowers, the venue, the food. And when Grace told her she was going to be her maid of honor, Tiffany literally demanded. And when I say demanded, I mean she threw a complete tantrum that she have her own special entrance at the ceremony, separate from the other bridesmaids, with her own music and everything. Grace agreed, because, according to her, Tiffany had been there for her during very difficult times and deserved that special recognition. I didn't say anything because I didn't want to start our marriage fighting over her best friend, but inside I was thinking, this is ridiculous. This is a wedding, not the Tiffany show. The wedding itself was beautiful. I'm not gonna lie, despite Tiffany's dramatic entrance with a different song and the whole act. We got married in May, like 3 years ago, at a gorgeous venue outside Denver with mountain views, and that day, Grace looked so happy that I thought, well, it was worth putting up with all the planning craziness. The first months of marriage were great. We lived in a 2-bedroom apartment in Capitol Hill. We both worked full-time. We had our routines, our movie nights, our weekends exploring Denver, and honestly, we were happy. Tiffany was still a constant presence, calling Grace almost every day, texting at all hours, but I'd learned to live with it. Like, she's her best friend since college. I'm not going to ask her to cut her out of her life. But then, like 8 months into being married, something happened that changed everything. Kevin, Tiffany's boyfriend, broke up with her. And it wasn't a peaceful breakup. It was one of those dramatic breakups where he basically told her he couldn't stand her toxicity and constant need for attention anymore. Grace told me all this crying because Tiffany was devastated, and I tried to be understanding, really. I told Grace that of course Tiffany could stay with us for a few days while she found another place, because apparently she shared the apartment with Kevin and had nowhere to go immediately. A few days, I said. A few days turned into a full month of absolute hell. Tiffany set up in our second bedroom, the one we used as an office, and basically took over the entire apartment. She left her stuff everywhere, used our kitchen like it was a restaurant and never cleaned, inserted herself into conversations Grace and I were having, and worst of all, she cried every night at 2 in the morning, and Grace had to go console her. We couldn't have privacy, we couldn't have intimacy, we couldn't even watch a movie together without Tiffany appearing and starting to talk about Kevin and how much she missed him. I worked from home 2 days a week at that time, and those days Tiffany was also there because she was on medical leave for depression or something. And it drove me crazy listening to her talk on the phone with her friends for hours about her drama. After a month of this, I exploded. I told Grace, enough is enough. Tiffany needs to find her own place. This can't continue like this. We're newlyweds and we basically have a permanent roommate who's going through a constant emotional crisis. Grace immediately got defensive, told me I was being insensitive, that Tiffany was going through the worst time of her life. How could I be so cruel? I told her, I'm not being cruel, I'm being realistic. We've been doing this for a month and she's not even actively looking for an apartment. She's just here wallowing and waiting for everything to magically resolve itself. We had a horrible fight that night, the worst since we got married. But in the end, Grace agreed. I was right and told Tiffany she needed to move out. Tiffany left a week later, and the goodbye was dramatic like everything she did. She cried, hugged Grace for like 10 minutes, completely ignored me, and left the apartment saying something about how she hoped we'd be happy without her bothering us. I thought, finally, we can get back to our normal life. And for like 2 weeks, things got better. Grace and I reconnected. We had our privacy back. We were us again. But Tiffany kept calling constantly, kept texting, kept needing Grace for everything, and I could see Grace felt guilty about having kicked her out of the house, and then came the day that destroyed my life. It was a Friday. I remember perfectly because we'd planned a romantic dinner at home to celebrate that we finally had our space back. I got home from work around 6 in the evening, and Grace was sitting on the couch with her phone in her hand and an expression on her face I'd never seen before. She was pale. Her eyes were red like she'd been crying, and when she saw me come in, she looked at me with a mixture of fury and pain that froze my blood. I asked her what was wrong, and she just said, Tiffany called me. She told me something, and I need you to tell me the truth right now. My heart started racing because I had no idea what she was talking about. I said, the truth. About what? What did Tiffany tell you? And Grace got up from the couch and started pacing back and forth, clearly trying to keep her composure. Finally, she told me, Tiffany saw you yesterday downtown, at that coffee shop near your office, making out with another woman. She said she saw you clearly, that you were very close, very affectionate, that there's no way she was mistaken. And I need you to tell me right now if it's true. I stood there in the middle of the living room trying to process what I'd just heard. Yesterday. Coffee shop near my office. Making out with another woman. None of that made sense because yesterday I'd been in meetings all day. I'd eaten lunch at my desk because I had an important presentation at 3 in the afternoon, and after work I'd gone straight to the gym and then home. I hadn't been at any coffee shop. I hadn't been with any woman. Nothing Tiffany was saying had happened. I explained all this to Grace. I told her Tiffany was lying, that I don't know why, but she was making up this entire story, that I'd never cheated on her and never would. Grace looked at me with tears in her eyes and said, why would Tiffany lie to me about something like this? What does she gain from it? And I told her, I don't know, Grace, but I'm sure there's a reason. Maybe she's angry because we made her move out. Maybe she's jealous of our relationship. I don't know. But I swear on everything I have that I'm telling the truth. She shook her head and said, Tiffany described everything to me in such detail. She told me the woman was blonde, that you were wearing your blue shirt, the one you wear on Thursdays, that you were sitting in the corner of the coffee shop, that she saw you caress her face. That made me angry because it was so specific and so completely false that it was obvious Tiffany had planned this carefully. I told Grace, think about it. Yesterday, I was at the office until 6. I have emails with timestamps that prove it. I have messages from my coworkers. I can show you my gym log. I can prove to you I wasn't where Tiffany says I was. But Grace was too upset to listen to logic. She started yelling at me, saying that Tiffany had never lied to her in 10 years of friendship, that she trusted Tiffany more than anyone, that there had to be an explanation, and obviously the explanation was that I'd cheated on her. I tried to calm her down, tried to hug her, but she pushed me away and told me not to come near her. I begged her to think clearly, to consider all the times Tiffany had been dramatic and manipulative, all the times she'd caused problems between us, but she didn't want to listen. That night, Grace slept in the second bedroom, and I stayed in our bed feeling like I was in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. The next day, I tried to talk to her again. I showed her my work emails from the day before. I showed her my gym log, but she said all that could have been after the coffee shop, that it didn't prove anything, that Tiffany had been very clear about what she saw. The next few days were hell. Grace barely spoke to me. Tiffany kept calling her and texting her, supposedly to support her, and I felt completely helpless because there was no way to prove a negative, no way to prove that something hadn't happened. I begged Grace to at least confront Tiffany with me present, to ask her for more details, to look for inconsistencies in her story. But Grace refused, saying she wasn't going to subject her best friend to an interrogation because I was lying. A week after the accusation, Grace sent me a text message, not a face-to-face conversation, a text message, saying she was moving in with a friend and wanted a divorce. I couldn't believe it. She sent me a text message to end our marriage. When I got home that afternoon, she'd already packed several suitcases and was leaving. I tried to stop her, tried to make her reason, but she just said, "I can't be with someone I don't trust. I can't be with someone who lies to my face." And she left. Just like that. 3 years together, a year of marriage, and she left because her psychotic best friend had invented a complete story about an infidelity that never happened. The next few months were the worst of my life. Grace officially started the divorce process, and since we had no kids or complicated property, it was relatively quick. I kept living in the apartment we'd shared, surrounded by memories of what we'd had, trying to understand how my life had fallen apart so quickly. The worst of all was that Tiffany made sure to tell all our mutual friends her version of the story, painting me as a horrible cheater who'd blatantly deceived Grace. Some friends asked me directly if it was true, and I told them no. But I could see on their faces they weren't sure whether to believe me. Others simply cut me off, decided that if Grace had left me for that, it was probably true. I went through all the stages of grief, denial, anger, deep sadness. There were days I could barely get out of bed, days when I wondered if it was worth continuing to fight for a truth that no one seemed to want to hear. My work suffered, my friendships suffered, my mental health suffered, and the whole time, Tiffany was still there, probably feeling victorious, probably enjoying the chaos she'd created. Sometimes I wondered why she'd done it, if she was really that resentful because we'd kicked her out of the apartment, or if she was just such a toxic person that she couldn't stand seeing Grace happy with me. 2 months after Grace left, when I'd already started to accept that maybe I'd never be able to clear my name, I got a Facebook message from a woman named Monica. I didn't know her well. I knew she was Tiffany's friend, but wasn't part of our close circle. The message said, "I need to talk to you about what happened with Grace. I have information I think you need to see. Can we meet?" I was skeptical. Honestly thought it might be another one of Tiffany's tricks, but something in the tone of the message made me say yes. We agreed to meet at a public cafe the next day. Monica arrived with her laptop and a serious expression. She sat across from me and said, "Look, I don't know you well, but what Tiffany did to you is wrong and I can't stay quiet." She opened her laptop and showed me a text message conversation between her and Tiffany. I started reading and felt like the floor was opening up beneath me. They were messages from like 3 months ago, shortly after Tiffany had moved out of our apartment. In the messages, Tiffany was telling Monica that she was furious with me for kicking her out, that Grace had chosen me over her, and that she was going to make Grace regret that decision. I kept reading, my hands shaking. In another message, Tiffany literally said, "I'm going to make up that I saw him with another woman. Grace will believe me over him. I know her. I know exactly how to manipulate her." Monica also had screenshots of later messages where Tiffany bragged that her plan had worked, that Grace had left her cheating husband, that finally Grace would understand who was really important in her life. It was all there, black and white, irrefutable proof that Tiffany had deliberately fabricated the entire story to destroy my marriage. I asked Monica why she was showing me this now, why she'd waited 2 months. She explained that at first, she didn't think much of the messages, thought Tiffany was just venting and wouldn't really do it. But when she found out Grace and I had gotten divorced, she started feeling guilty for not saying anything. She told me she'd been trying to distance herself from Tiffany in recent weeks because she realized what kind of person she really was, and that she'd finally decided doing the right thing was more important than maintaining a toxic friendship. I thanked her like 1,000 times. I think I even cried there in the cafe. Didn't care that people were staring at us. I had proof. I finally had proof that I'd been telling the truth all this time. Monica emailed me the screenshots and told me that if I needed her to testify or anything, she'd do it without a problem. I asked her if I could contact Grace and show her this, and she said that was exactly what I should do, that Grace deserved to know the truth about her supposed best friend. That same night, I sent Grace a message asking her to meet me. She refused at first, but I told her I had important information about Tiffany that she needed to see. To please give me just 30 minutes of her time. She finally agreed, and we arranged to meet at a park near where she was living. When I arrived, I saw her sitting on a bench, and my heart broke again because she looked so different. Thinner, more tired, like these months had destroyed her too. I sat next to her, keeping my distance because I didn't know how she'd react. I said, "Grace, you need to see something," and I took out my phone with the screenshots Monica had sent me. She looked at them with confusion at first, but as she kept reading, I saw how her expression changed from confused to horrified. She read each message twice, then 3 times, like she couldn't believe what she was seeing. When she finished, she sat there in absolute silence for what seemed like an eternity. Finally, she looked at me with tears in her eyes and said, "Oh my God, what have I done?" She started crying. Not silent crying, but loud sobs that shook her whole body. She told me through tears, "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. How could I believe her over you? How could I be so stupid? How could I throw it all away without even giving you the benefit of the doubt?" I didn't know what to say because part of me wanted to comfort her, but a bigger part was furious with her for not believing me, for not trusting me after 3 years together. Grace begged me to forgive her, told me she understood if I couldn't, but that she'd do anything to fix this, that we could start over, that now she knew the truth and would never doubt me again. She told me the divorce wasn't technically finalized yet, that we could stop it, that we could try again. And I sat there listening to her and feeling absolutely nothing. Well, not nothing. I felt a lot. But nothing I felt made me want to get back together with her. I told her, "Grace, I appreciate the apology, and I'm glad you finally know the truth, but I can't get back together with you." She looked at me like I'd slapped her and asked why. I explained that when I needed her most, when I most needed her to trust me, she chose to believe her friend over her husband. I told her that showed me she never had the same faith in our relationship that I did, that at the first serious problem, she abandoned me without even giving me a real chance to prove my innocence. I told her that maybe in another universe we could have gotten past this, but in this universe, the damage was already done and there was no way to rebuild the trust that had been lost. Grace cried even harder, begged me to reconsider, but I was firm in my decision. We were done. Not because of Tiffany's lies, but because of Grace's choice to believe Tiffany over me. That was her decision, and now she had to live with the consequences. I got up from the bench and left, and although part of me felt horrible leaving her there crying, another part felt liberated, like I could finally start closing this chapter of my life. But the story doesn't end there because making sure everyone knew the truth became my mission. I contacted all our mutual friends and showed them the screenshots. The reactions were immediate and dramatic. Some apologized profusely for having doubted me. Others got angry with me for having waited so long to show the proof, even though I explained I'd just gotten it. But the important thing is that within days, our entire social circle knew what Tiffany had done. Tiffany was basically excommunicated from our group. No one wanted anything to do with her. No one answered her. Messages? She was blocked from all the group chats. Rebecca, another mutual friend, kept me updated on what was happening on Tiffany's side. And apparently Tiffany was completely falling apart. She started posting on Facebook about how everyone was fake, how they'd abandoned her when she needed them most, playing the victim like always. But no one bought it this time because everyone had seen proof of her lies. What happened next was almost like karmic justice in record time. Grace tried to completely cut contact with Tiffany, but Tiffany didn't take it well. She texted her constantly, called at all hours, even showed up at Grace's work one day demanding they talk. Grace had to threaten a restraining order for Tiffany to finally leave her alone. Meanwhile, Grace had moved back in with her parents because she couldn't afford her own place without my income, and according to Rebecca, Grace's mom was furious with her for having destroyed her marriage because of a toxic friend. But wait, it gets better. Like 3 months after all this drama, I found out from Rebecca that Tiffany had lost her job. Apparently, she'd had conflicts with several coworkers, and when her boss found out about all the drama she'd caused, destroying a marriage with lies, he decided she was a risk to the work environment and let her go. Tiffany tried to sue for wrongful termination or something, but it didn't go anywhere. Without a job, without friends, basically without anyone who could stand her, Tiffany became a complete social pariah. And here comes my favorite part of this whole story. Like 6 months after everything, Rebecca told me that Grace had tried to reconcile with Tiffany. Apparently, Grace was so desperate and lonely that she thought maybe they could fix their friendship, that maybe Tiffany had learned her lesson. Grace showed up at Tiffany's apartment with flowers and a long letter asking for forgiveness for cutting her out of her life. And you know what Tiffany did? She slammed the door in her face. But not before telling Grace that she'd been an idiot for choosing me over her in the first place, that she deserved to be alone, and that they'd never be friends again. That was probably the only time I felt sorry for Grace, because she finally understood what I'd seen from the beginning. That Tiffany was a fundamentally selfish and manipulative person who only cared about herself. Grace had sacrificed her marriage for that friendship, and in the end, Tiffany rejected her in the cruelest way possible. It's almost poetic, in a way. Today, like a year and a half after all this exploded, I'm in a much better place. The divorce was finalized months ago. I moved to a new apartment in a different part of Denver, and I've been focusing on myself, on my work, on rebuilding the friendships that were damaged during all this. I still see Rebecca occasionally, and she keeps me updated on the continuing disaster that is Tiffany's life, who apparently still has no steady job and keeps posting dramatic things on social media about how the world has treated her unfairly. Grace sent me a message like 2 months ago apologizing again, telling me she still thinks about me every day, that she made the worst mistake of her life. I responded with something short and polite, basically wishing her the best but making it clear there's no future for us. I'm not angry with her anymore, honestly, but I also don't want to have anything to do with her again. I learned an important lesson from all this, that trust is the foundation of any relationship, and once it's broken that way, it's almost impossible to rebuild it. Do I feel vindicated? Absolutely. Does it give me satisfaction knowing Tiffany is paying for what she did? I'm not gonna lie, yes. I know it sounds petty, but after months of being treated like a cheater when I never did anything wrong, seeing it all turn against her feels like justice. And most importantly, I've learned to trust my instincts. From the beginning, I knew Tiffany was toxic, and I was right. Next time I'm in a relationship, I'm not going to ignore those red flags. Next time, I'm not going to compromise to keep the peace. And next time, I'm going to make sure my partner trusts me enough not to believe a third person over her own husband.